You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody? I hope you're all well on this Wednesday evening and settling back to listen to another episode of Haunted Histories here, exclusively on Parasearch Radio. Well, I'm not going to keep you too long because I haven't got too much to tell you. It's been a bit of a quiet week-ish. Kids are on half term, so, restricts what I can do, but yeah, you still get a copy of Haunted Magazine with the article in by yours truly and the interview with one of the other Parasearch presenters, Jolene Lockwood. You've got all the Parasearch shows you can still listen to. Tell me, who listened to the one that Kerry and Ashley did last Friday on 30 East Drive? What did you think? Seriously, what did you think? Did you enjoy it? Did you think they missed anything? Are there any questions you would have asked? Let me know. Let them know. Show them some love. Show them some love. Well, hi Jem. Okay, so I've got a good hour's worth of interview here to play out for you, so I'm not going to keep gassing because, I can gas for Britain, as you all know. So here is the interview. Okay. And so, on tonight's Haunted Histories, I am joined by someone who our mutual friend, Mr. Richard Estep, put us in touch with each other. And in fact, his actual words to me were, this was when I was actually researching a show on Bobby Mackey's, this lady and I got in touch with each other, because Richard said to me, I'm going to put you in touch with my good friend, Shannon. You two will love each other. You both love history, you're both into the paranormal, and you both hate people making shit up about stuff. So he did, and we got chatting, didn't we, Shannon?
Yes, we did.
Oh, I can say things like shit.
Yeah.
But it's true. We don't like people making shit up, do we?
No, not at all.
We discovered we had a mutual love for that. Well, Shannon is joining us all the way from Georgia in the good old US of A. I've made her talk for at least an hour before we started recording this because I just love her accent. So we've been chatting about sort of various stuff about travelling and all that kind of thing. But as I said, Shannon is actually she is a historian, she is a paranormal investigator, and she's also a writer. You're basically me, but in Georgia, Shannon.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And not quite as cute as you.
Oh, thank you. I disagree, but thank you. I love the way you had your hair done recently when you had it all straightened and. Oh,
straightened. Yes, I'm still getting used to that. It's different, but yeah, my hairstylist told me I'm one of these. I've had an '80s perm my entire life, and when I made her straighten it, she's like, "You've got to stay that way for 6 months before I'll even think about giving you another perm."
Oh no, I think it looks lovely straight.
I'm only 2 months in.
No, it looks amazing. This long, sort of dark, straight, raven sort of hair. Oh, it's lovely. It's lovely. But so, you're welcome. Shannon and I have discovered we do agree on the whole fact is definitely stranger than fiction. And so we thought tonight's show we would pick a place that Shannon has done loads of research into. She's kind of done my job for me, really. And it's one that's been on Ghost Adventures. I think it's been on quite a few of the sort of your paranormal shows on television, which is why it, shall we say, incurred our fact is better than fiction wrath. Because of some of the...
Yes, that incurred my wrath.
Yeah, it vexes me, some of the stuff that's been made up. But we're going to talk about that in a second, because, as I said, Shannon's a writer. She's produced 2 books. One is How Not to Be a Ghost Hunter, and that's the one that the front cover is those brilliant orb pictures. Now, we were just discussing how she got that picture, and I found it quite funny, because you were saying it was you had to go back to a picture you'd taken sort of 15, 16 years ago to find one that had orbs in it.
Yeah, because when we investigate now, my husband and I, we investigate together, and we've got a really good Nikon D7000, which is, a really good SLR camera. Mm-hmm. And you cannot get orbs. It doesn't matter what you do with that camera. You can shake dust in front of it and take the picture, and you will not get orbs.
Yeah.
And, we spent an entire evening in the basement trying to produce orbs for a book cover for that book. And when I couldn't do it, I went back in my photo archives to my very first digital camera that I got in 1999. And, those cameras, back then, that was the advent of orbs, was digital cameras.
Yep.
And we had gone to an underground cave thing for a tour that had a river through it, so it was all misty and all that stuff. So every picture we took in there was full of orbs, which, back in 1999, 2000, we thought we'd discovered the holy grail of photographing ghosts. And now here we are, 2019, and the instruction manual for your camera is telling you why you have orbs and they're not dead people.
But the amount of people that are still adamant that they are, it does my head in.
And oh my God, the ones that, but they're pink or they're blue, and they mean this if they're this color and they're that color. So I've started telling people, well, you're going to know you photographed me as an orb in a picture if it's plaid. If you got that orb, then it's a dead Shannon.
A kilt-wearing Shannon.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, kilt-wearing Shannon. No, it just, I've had quite a few heated discussions with people about this, because one of the things I do say is you can't prove unequivocally orbs don't exist, but I don't see why an orb can only be picked up on camera. You should be able to see it with the naked eye. If you can see it with the naked eye, chances are it's something slightly unusual that needs investigating. But I think the funniest thing I had was some people I know, they were taking photos in, I think it was like an old World War II shelter, something called an Anderson shelter. And she was taking photos on her mobile phone, and she was looking at them going, oh my God, look, there's loads of orbs in here. And I stood to the side of her, told her to hold her camera up, ready to take a photo. I took a photo of her camera, side on, with the flash illuminating all the dust in the atmosphere. And I showed her that, and I said, that's what you're picking up on your camera.
Busted her orb bubble.
I did bust her orb bubble, and she seemed to appreciate that I'd busted it. She didn't learn. She still kept taking photos using her mobile phone camera and saying they were orbs. But I thought, well, I did that quite easily, and I think the best one I saw recently, it was some photos in a loft space, an attic space, in an old World War II building, and this loft space had loads of fiberglass insulation down. And a guy had taken... you know where I'm going with this, don't you? Well, this guy had taken loads of photos, and he said, what does everyone think of this? Now, he'd put them on there sarcastically, and he'd actually said to me, I'm waiting to see how many people go, oh my God, look at all those orbs of former servicemen. Oh yeah, they came. And this one woman was saying, I'm an incredibly experienced investigator. You've got lots of orbs, spirits of servicemen now. I need to get in there to investigate. And I have to admit, I did put, if you were an incredibly experienced investigator, the first thing you would be looking at is the fact you've got fiberglass insulation, dust, you're in an attic space, therefore heat rises, therefore the heat is pulling the dust up. Surely you've got to debunk that first before turning around and saying that's loads of spirits of dead servicemen. She blocked me.
Of course. Of course.
I laughed, but
well, I love, when I'm speaking at a convention or something and somebody will come up with their cell phone and say, look at this picture I took of me in a hot tub and look at all the orbs of the dead people that are around me. Mm-hmm. Really? And how much were you drinking in that hot tub while you were in there?
I was just thinking, have you ever seen... I said this on a show last week, and then, the film Annie, with the original version of the film Annie?
With Carol Burnett in it?
With Carol Burnett, and she's got the bath full of gin, where she's brewing her own... I was just thinking of that. Maybe that was what the bath was. It was the bath of gin, and they were drinking their own bath water.
Gin orbs.
Gin orbs. But you have actually got a pet orb, haven't you?
Yes, I do. His name is Sir Nigel of Orbsley.
How is Sir Nigel?
He's very sad because we haven't been on any trips lately. Sir Nigel is a lush. And, of course, when we go investigate, we don't drink, before the investigation.
Yeah.
That's a big no-no. No alcohol before.
Yeah.
But when we get to a hotel of wherever we're staying at, he always likes to go to the bar to see what they've got down there. So, I have a tendency to take pictures of him, with alcoholic beverages after we've investigated. He loves whiskey. He loves moonshine. He's not a real big beer drinker. But, we take him and he, we'll hang him on things and make it look like he's suspended somewhere and take pictures of him. This is the only orb I believe in. One day he's going to have his own Facebook page.
I think he's got, Instagram account. His own Instagram account. It's got to be done. Yeah. It's got to be done. So, I say, you've written 2 books. You've written How Not to Be a Ghost Hunter, which has got this brilliant orb picture on the front. You've also written one called Paranormal Folklore, Nevermore. Now, tell us about what triggered you writing that book, Shannon.
Paranormal Folklore is my baby. It is my heart and soul. It is 30 years of research. Now, I don't mind telling everybody I'm 50, and I fell in love with the paranormal when I was 8, when I saw a book called Haunted Houses by Larry Kettlecamp. Mm-hmm. And the front of this book was a picture of the brown lady at Rynham Hall, right?
Yeah.
And it became my mission at age 8 to capture a picture of a ghost.
Yeah.
And so, my parents would take me on vacations, and I'd spend my summer in cemeteries, trying to catch ghosts, there in battlefields. And, our vacations were always historical places when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So then the genealogy thing came around when I was 13 and had to do a project for school. And when I got, a little bit older, I was like, well, I can merge the two of these. When we go out to a location, I want to know the history of not only the house, but I want to know the town, the land around it, and because I had been doing genealogy research for so long and learned before the advent of computers how to do that kind of research, not just going to the internet and looking something up, but actually going to the archives and libraries and things like that. When we would do an investigation, the client would end up with a book I had little PDF book I had put together of all the original documents I'd found that related to that house and the people that had lived there, and many family trees of the people that had lived in the house, because, my thing was always, if you're going to go investigate, you need to know what was going on there. I'm not one of these that believes going in blind, because to me, you cannot conduct a good EVP session if you're just sitting around in the dark going, who here wants to talk to me? If you can ask questions that may be relevant to whoever the dead person is, you may tend to elicit an actual relevant response.
Oh, you're preaching to the converted there, sister.
I know. But, so that the two kind of married. And, then with the advent of the ghost hunting shows, I realized, with some of them, when they were doing their historical recreations to let us know what supposedly happened at whatever location they were at, I always say the trigger for me was the episode of Ghost Adventures where they went to Bobby Mackey's Music World. Mm-hmm. And, the murder of Pearl Bryan is something I had been studying since I was 13. I knew that case backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
And here they started spouting stuff about her and Satanists and all the stuff. And I'm sitting there going, what the holy hell?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you get that information? So that kind of kicked off, okay, well, if they're doing that with this location, what are they doing with all the others?
Yep.
So I started making a list. You know, every time one of the ghost hunting shows, you know, whether it was Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures or whoever went somewhere, you know, I noted, you know, okay, this is this location, this is the history that they're giving you. Let me see what a cursory search, you know, using my historical investigation skills can debunk while I'm watching the show, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there, you know, and I'm doing research while the show's going on. I'm like, well, they got that wrong. They got that wrong. They got that wrong. Where the hell did they even come up with this? Because this bears nothing to the original story.
Yep.
And I was like, you know, people need to know this. Because not only are they doing a disservice to the dead people by lying about them or attaching a history to them that is not true and in some cases cruel. You know, this person's dead, can't defend themselves. In the case of like Bathsheba Sherman, you know, I realized, you know, that in my heart I felt I had a debt. I owed a debt to these people to get their real stories out there.
Yeah. And
nothing makes me madder than these places that charge you, you know, $300, $400, $500, over $1,000 in the case of Waverly Hills Sanatorium to come investigate, and they're giving you fake facts. Yeah. You cannot do a good investigation based on fake facts.
Well, there's a whole experiment based. I mean, you look at something like the Philip experiment when those parapsychologists and everything back in the 70s in Canada invented a spirit, didn't they? They invented this spirit called Philip. Now, that still gets done now because, as I think you mentioned it in your book, all it takes is for one person to misrepresent. I think it was a hotel you mentioned in your book where it was a little boy who'd drowned, but the easiest thing to find was a little girl who drowned in a flood or something. And so and so people would start thinking that the voice they had in EVP was just quite a masculine sounding little girl. And so they'd start talking to this. Well, it wasn't this little girl. It could have been the little boy. And all it took was a little bit more digging to find out who the person was. But it's one of the paranormal phenomena, isn't it? That you can start calling someone by a specific name because someone's told you that's it, or Chinese Whispers has told you that's what the case is, and you get a reaction. I mean, the other one I think of is Malvern Manor, with the little girl there who's you know, purported to have hung herself. She didn't hang herself there. She did hang herself, but not Inez, however they pronounce it. But she comes to see people there. Now, of course, you've got the brigade who say, well, actually, it's a demon and it's trying to possess people and it's masquerading as a child. Could it not be?
Because everything's a demon.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. But but could it not be that because people have been calling out for her so much, she's thought, okay, I'm going to come along and I'll show you what happened to me. But they've got their story wrong. And, you know, even, I know Josh Hurd, who runs it, he will tell people, well, no, she didn't die here. We don't know why she appears here, but she did not die here. But for how long was it? You know, even when you watch some of the ghost hunting shows, they'll talk about the girl who died in the closet here. She didn't die there. That's quite an important fact. But then if you've got investigators who come in, as you say, who don't do their research, who don't double check, well, could this be possible? We can't say yes or no for definite, but we can say if it's possible. And yet they assume...
Well, it's like I always use the example of Lavinia Fisher at Old Charleston Jail.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, there are so many lies about her. And, you know... People talk about going and investigating there, and, you know, they start talking about all these things that are supposedly attributed to her, and then they end up getting attacked. Well, you know, darn it, if I'm a ghost, and you're sitting there telling me that I murdered people when I didn't, and Lavinia Fisher never murdered one person.
Nope.
You know, much less 100, but not even one. She wasn't even tried and convicted for murder. But if I'm going to go in there and start talking to her and telling her what a horrible person she is because she murdered these people, you know, yeah, I'm going to get attacked because I'm lying about her.
You're going to get pretty irate if you're that spirit who you've got someone accusing you of doing something which is nowhere near what you actually did. You were unfairly, I mean, based on the stuff I've read of yours and other stuff I've read, it was pretty she was treated pretty darned unfairly. Yeah, you are going to be pretty knocked.
When I die, if people start, trying to say that kind of stuff about me, I'm going to make your worst demon look like the boy next door. Is what I'm going to do to you for what you were lying about me about.
Should we be warning Dave about this, though?
Oh, no, he's well aware. He's well aware.
Oh, okay. Just so I check. But, I agree with you. I mean, the fact that the cases that you cover in the book are all ones that most people have probably heard of. Lavinia Fisher, who's associated with old Charleston Jail, isn't it, that she's associated with? And she's the one her and her husband were meant to have killed all these people using oleander-infused tea and in an inn. And she's meant to have gone to her death wearing her wedding dress and telling people she'd go and take any accounts they've got, she'll take them to hell with her or something along those lines. And your book does very well point out the inaccuracies in that story and has kind of you can't really question the proof that when you've got newspaper reports, arrest reports, court records, can't really question those as having been made up. Well, I suppose you could in a way, but
no, you can't.
But
I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, it's, and I say in the book, it's not like she was a lovely woman.
No.
She was convicted of highway robbery, and she did beat the crap out of some people, but she didn't kill anybody.
Much less 100 men to try and steal their money from them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And hanging a white woman in 1820 was just something that wasn't done. So that whole case is, that's one that really gets my goat.
Yeah, I do feel sorry for her. I mean, she probably never stood a chance. Let's be honest, because one of the things you raise in the book about her, and I know we're going to be talking about Myrtles and not Lavinia, but one of the things you raise in the book about her is, was she actually mixed race? Because isn't one of the things she said is, I can't believe they're going to hang a white woman or something along those lines. So, if she was, I know historically, if you were mixed race, you weren't treated very well, were you? Because you were.
Not back then, no, because we're talking 1820, and that's especially down in Charleston, slave trade was big down there, and if you were a mulatto, a lot of mulatto women looked white, so it's always a big fear for them to it not be found out that you had any blood in you that was not white. And but there's court documents that show that her husband's father bought a slave named Lavinia. And so it's assumed that I shouldn't use the word assume, you could suppose, because this took place farther away than Charleston, that John fell in love with her and she could pass for white. And they ran away to Charleston and began, their nefarious highway robbery stuff. But to accuse her of being a murderess, and not only, America's first serial killer, America's first woman hung, none of those things apply to her because, she wasn't the first woman in America hung and she didn't kill anybody.
But it's very possible she is haunting Charleston Jail because she's fed up with all the stories about her and she's hanging around there to try and make people listen to her side of the story, and when they don't listen to it because they can't hear her or whatever that reason is, she gets angry and she attacks because she's trying to get her point across. Seems quite logical to me. Another one you talked, obviously we talked about Pearl Bryan, which was the one that's related to, I say related to Bobby Mackey's.
It's the one other people relate her to.
I know, that's why you can't see it, but I'm doing it in inverted commas, related to Bobby Mackey's, because that's the one a lot of people say her ghost is at Bobby Mackey's because their head was thrown down the portal to hell that's in Bobby Mackey's and stuff. But even talking to one of the investigators who investigates there, Angela, even she goes, nah, there's no proof. And she debunks a lot of what the television shows have said in the past. So I think with some places they are starting to look at the real stuff, because they're starting to realise that is just as exciting, if not more so, as some of the fabrication. And when you can actually prove something is historically accurate, an experience you have is historically accurate, it makes it so much more exciting, I think.
Well, yeah. And it's like I always tell people, when I write about these places and I do the research, I'm not saying the place is not haunted. There was enough crap that went on in all the places that I write about for it to have every reason to be haunted.
Yeah.
But it's not haunted for the ways that the TV shows are telling you that they are.
Yeah.
And then, you've got people that are paying their hard-earned money. You've got these, paranormal groups that, scrimp and save for years to go investigate places like Waverly, where they charge you over $1,000 for a weekend, or $200, $300, $400 at places to get 12 hours or whatever. And it's under false pretenses. And that's why paranormal folklore came about, because if you're going to go investigate those places, I want you to have the real history so you can have an effective investigation.
Yeah. I mean, this is the conversation I have with quite a lot of people. A lot of people will, as you say, they like to go in blind. They don't want to know the history of a place, and they'll say to me, they'll go, "How can you go into a location? You already got a preconceived idea of what could have happened here." And I say, well, firstly, I never read up on the hauntings of a place before I do an investigation. That's where I go in blind. I don't know anything about what other people have experienced there. I look that up afterwards. But it's very hard when you do something like we do, when you're looking at history pretty much all the time, aren't you? Even when you're not officially researching stuff, you'll be listening, you'll hear something that's historical, and you might perk up and listen to it on the television, or you'll read something on the internet, that on Facebook or whatever, that's to do with some event. You think, oh, just quickly. You can't stop. It's addictive. It's impossible for me not to have a bit of an idea about a place. It's impossible. I can look at a building in the UK and I can tell you pretty much what era it was built in, just by looking at it, because of all the other stuff I've done. So some places I do research the history quite heavily before I go in. Some places I just know the basics. So say if it was an air base, I will know whether it was RAF, whether it was US Air Force, whether it was built for World War II, and maybe what aircraft were based there. I won't know any of the names. I won't know any of the missions that it ran. I might do if someone's asked me to look that up, but normally I'll just have a basic idea. But as you say, that means that you can channel what you're asking. You can interpret the evidence a bit better as well. I know when I did a fort last year, and we had this young guy come through who kept saying he was trying to explain what he did, and he kept showing me water, and I was thinking, well, I know we're in a fort, we're by the water, and I was like, you were based at the fort, and he was getting really irate. No. And then all of a sudden I remembered that next door to the fort was the Royal Naval Air Station in World War One. So I said to him, did you work at RNAS Felixstowe? Yes. So, and it was because of the evidence he was telling me, that I was able to put those pieces together and cotton on to what he was trying to say. If I didn't know my basic history of what had been there, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
And people don't get that. It's, again, like you, I don't care what other people have experienced, but I want to be able to go in and know what was experienced in the lives of the people that used to live there.
Yeah.
Was this a farm? Was there a yellow fever outbreak here at any given time? Was there some kind of natural disaster? Did a tornado come through? Did a hurricane come through? Was there a massive train wreck down the road? Because those things, it's like we were talking about earlier. It's not just the house that I research. It's the town. It's the state. It's the, whatever in a whatever mile radius, could have happened, because it's just like you were talking about with the other house. You don't know, the girl didn't die there, and you don't know why she comes to visit, but we all know ghosts are mobile. They're not stuck anywhere. And, they're, in my opinion, this is one of my theories, a lot of times they are drawn to a place because they're looking for attention. And if you've got all these people going to this one, like the Malvern place, oh, there's all these people there that are looking for something like me. I'm going to go show up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly. And because we don't know if they operate in the same sort of time and space continuum as we do and everything. Yeah, it's entirely plausible, but it's the fact that it's an unexplained. It's not oh, she died here, that's why she's here. Well, she died nearby, but maybe she did have links to it when it was a hotel. Maybe she came to some do here. We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody will ever know. But I'm very protective of history, and I'm very protective of being honest about it rather than covering things up. And one of the things I do want to say is we're going to start talking about Louisiana and the Myrtles soon. There might be the odd terminology that we use that some people might find offensive. Nothing is meant to be offensive in a we want to offend you. Some of the stuff that happened back in the day is offensive to our 21st century. So I just want to say, if we do use any terminology that people go, oh, I can't believe they just said that, this is history. And I say this every week whenever I know I'm going to have to use words that aren't socially acceptable anymore. It's history. But before we get on to that, when you've been doing your research into places, have you had a moment, one of those really profound eureka, that's where it all fits together moments?
Every place I research is like that. I can't say that there's one particular thing that's done that. That's a hard question because, I consider all these places my babies. Mm-hmm. And when I find that one thing, well, there is one, and we'll get into it when we talk about the Myrtles, so I don't want to say it yet.
Ooh, you tease.
Yeah, yes, I'm teasing. I can answer that question while we're talking about the Myrtles, because there was a aha moment with that place.
You see, mine's normally when I find that newspaper article that mentions something I've been searching and searching and searching for, and it gives me the next hole to go down to find out even more about it. Yeah, I've had a couple of those. Spent 6 hours trawling through online newspapers online, and then suddenly you find that thing that makes you go, oh my, that fits together now. I say my poor husband's used to it.
Or you find that thing that's like, oh crap, now I got to research this.
Oh, that happens all the time.
No plans of researching this. It has nothing to do with what I'm researching, but oh my God, I got to find the end of this.
Yep. Well, I tell you what, we'll talk about the Myrtles in a sec. But when I'm doing these kind of shows, somebody said to me, "It's easy. You just look up the place. And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't work like that. I go off on tangents, and the tangent I went off on was the slave trade, and some of the stuff I read to do with it, just sort of around the subject. I was actually sitting here at the computer, actually verbally going, "Oh my God."
I was in tears.
So I do read around subjects quite a bit. I even went off and read up a bit about the Whiskey Rebellion as well. Mm-hmm. So I do read up around subjects, and it's. I was trying to explain to someone that you're going to research for an hour. 6 hours later, you're still sitting there reading stuff because you've just gone off on tangent after tangent. And as you say, you suddenly read something and think, I think I want to learn a bit more about that, which then takes you off in another direction. And you're like, now you're about 10 miles away from what it was you were starting the research on. But it all comes around together eventually. Everything interlinks. That's
like
something
when,
that I'm
when
finding.
We get into the part about the Myrtles, I think the worst tangent I went off on with that was when we get to the part about the ancient Indian burial ground. And here I am, I spent days tracking Indian tribe movements that, it's like it's one sentence in, or was going to be one sentence in the book. And it almost turned into its whole other book about the movement of the Indian tribes in that part of Louisiana.
That was fascinating, that bit. I found that bit absolutely fascinating. Also quite shocking that people could argue that their things had just been left there, therefore they were... It's a bit like going into a graveyard and taking all the gravestones. So, well, they just left them there. But we'll talk about why we're talking about Indian burial grounds as well. We talk about the Myrtles. But, okay, so... So, Myrtles Plantation. It's in Louisiana, in a place called How do you pronounce it? San Francisville? Is that right?
St. Francisville.
St. Francisville. Now, one of the things that was really interesting that I read in your book, and this is something that I did kind of know, but not in the detail that you do, is that when Myrtles was built, it wasn't actually called Myrtles originally, was it? It was called Laurel Grove.
Correct.
But Louisiana didn't exist.
Nope. Louisiana was not a state at the time that he got the land grant to build the plantation. It was still owned, and this is where you got me. Who owned Louisiana? The French.
Bayou something or other?
It was Bayou Sarah, is what it was called.
Right.
But Louisiana was. I think I'm gonna stick myself in the foot here. Before the Louisiana Purchase, it was a French territory.
Yeah.
And so at the time the plantation started, Louisiana didn't even exist.
Mm. So when I started looking up records, and I couldn't find anything that mentioned Louisiana, I found lots that mentioned that Bayou Sarah bit, and I didn't understand why until I reread your book and saw that Louisiana didn't actually exist back then. I was like, eureka moment. That is right. The Bayou stuff is right. So that's the first thing. This is just like a to Z of history lesson here. Check what somewhere was called back when the date you're looking it up, because if you looked up Myrtles Plantation, you were looking up anything to do with the guy who actually built it, David Bradford, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If you're looking up anything to do with him back in 1796, 1797, and you look up Myrtles Plantation, you're not going to find anything, because it wasn't called the Myrtles Plantation. Same as if you look up David Bradford, Louisiana, 1796, probably not going to find anything, because it wasn't called Louisiana. So this is kind of the thing that it's always worth looking up things in a different way, isn't it? It's always worth, if you don't know that side of the history, it's always worth
if you think about it with this, though, when he actually started construction of it, it was actually called something else. It was called Richland. Before it was called Laurel Grove. Before it was called Myrtles. So that plantation's gone by 3 different names. So, I mean, it's like, I know over where you are, because, you're where the history is, and, our history's not that old over here. But the example I always use is we have a county here in Georgia with a city where I did some research, and because making new counties when, America was building itself, this one particular city was in 4 different counties at different times, and each of those counties had their own courthouse, and you had to know what that city was called when it was in what county to go find the records for that place. Yeah. I know, like I said, that's not a common thing over there, but here it is.
Oh, you'd be surprised. They change the borders for our counties quite frequently. In fact, where one of my uncles lives, he's had 3 different counties attributed to his town.
But have they changed the name of the town?
Not the name of the town, but the county it's in. So therefore, the records, the county, county in the UK is like state is in the US. So he's been.
But here they'll change the city.
No, they've not changed. We don't tend to get cities changed. We haven't really had cities changed probably for about 1,000 years. But it has happened. It has happened.
We're famous for doing that here. Oh, we're going to put you in a new county and give you a new name. Okay. Go try to look up, land deed records for, something that's called Winder now that was called Jug Tavern, 100 years before that. And, okay.
Yeah, that is one of the blocks I've come up against when I've been researching some of the American shows I've done. It's like, why has this place only existed for like 50 years when I know full well it's been around for over 200? Yeah, yeah, that is. It does make life quite interesting. Yeah, so it does make life quite interesting knowing where to look. But David Bradford, he moved. We'll say Louisiana. Make life easy. He moved to the area of Louisiana because hadn't he fallen foul of George Washington?
Yes, he was in the Whiskey Rebellion and had to. He lived in Connecticut with his family and had to leave because they had a warrant out for his arrest until he was pardoned by the next president.
Yeah, I argue it was something about tax on certain alcoholic drinks, wasn't it, or something to do with drinks that had rye in them, or something.
You know
else
us crazy Americans. We're always mad at y'all for the tax on stuff. So anytime anybody tries to tax us on anything, we're gonna get up in arms and try to find a way to circumvent
it. Well, you just gotta go and brew your own moonshine. Moonshine. I actually had to explain to my husband what moonshine was the other day. I was quite disappointed in him. Ex-rugby player, and he didn't know what moonshine was. Anyway. So David built the plantation. We'll call it the plantation, although it's gone by a few different names. I think about 1799, wasn't it? He sent for his wife and children to come and join him when he got the pardon. When he got the pardon, yeah. Now, he wasn't there that long, was he? Before am I right in thinking his daughter married one of his students, didn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There was a man who decided that he didn't want to be a farmer. He wanted to be a lawyer, and he actually moved down. His name was Clark Woodruff, and he came down to be a student of Bradford, and ended up marrying his daughter.
Yeah, because Bradford was a lawyer, basically, wasn't he? He was a deputy attorney general, I believe, for the area or something.
Yeah.
So Woodruff. Now it's Woodruff that one of the first stories evolves around. I'm saying
one of the worst horrible lies ever made up by a dead person.
It's stories, fantasies. One of the sales things for Myrtles, the story of Chloe. Now, I bet any slave that was there who had the name Chloe is now pretty much turning in their grave that they could be the one that people would think this was who it's attributed to. But do you want to tell the story of Chloe as it's told?
Well, it's kind of hard to tell the story of a person who didn't exist, but I can tell you what they made up.
Look, we've done it with things like Cinderella and Snow White and all that kind of thing all our lives, so we can do this one with Chloe as well.
Let's turn Chloe into Cinderella, or as one of the evil stepsisters that she's been, made out to be.
Yeah.
Because the story is, if you go to the Myrtles, there was, a slave named Chloe, and she was supposedly in love with Clark Woodruff, who most people call the judge.
Who was meant to be a philanderer and have lots of affairs and sleep around and all that kind of thing, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was painted as a horrible. In the stories, he's painted as a horrible person. And depending on which version of the story you go with, Chloe displeased him somehow, whether she was eavesdropping or not minding her place as slaves were supposed to do back then. She displeased him, and he decided to have it out for her. So here in the States, the slave hierarchy kind of worked. You had house slaves and you had field slaves.
Yeah.
The house slaves were higher up the food chain, so to speak. So they got to be in the house. They got fed better. They had better clothes. The punishments, though sometimes, depending on the infraction, could be as bad. For the most part, the house slaves got away with a little bit more.
Yeah.
And they were the ones charged with watching the plantation owners' children and things like that, as opposed to the field slaves, which lived in, shacks somewhere on the property and only worked in the agricultural part of it.
Yeah.
So his punishment to her was to kick her out of the house and, demote her down to field hand.
Mm-hmm.
And, and again, depending on which version of the story you listen to, because there are more than one, she either decided she was going to, get back at him and kill his wife and children so that she could be with him, or she was going to make them sick and come in and play Florence Nightingale and save the day.
Oh, I like your little English reference there, Shannon.
Thank you. So she either poisoned them a little or poisoned them a lot. It just depends.
Yeah.
But according to the story, his poor wife and his 2 daughters and the child that she was pregnant with all died. Mm-hmm. And he got so mad that, again, the story splits. He either lynched her from a tree, or the other slaves did it because they didn't want to be seen as having been in any kind of association with what she did. Mm. Regardless of who did it, she was hanged from a tree, and her body was thrown in a river.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes great fiction for, some TV miniseries, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But Chloe never existed.
There's no slave in that time period known as Chloe.
No, because I spent forever. I mean, I cannot tell you how many weeks it took me. I was lucky in the fact that the state of Louisiana has something called the Louisiana Slave Database. Mm. And it is original documents that show the complete sale history, because they were considered property. Mm. And it lists them by name. It lists who owned them. It lists who bought them. It lists what they did. It lists what they were good for. And I spent weeks in tears reading how these people were written about. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this was the most emotional place I have researched, because I had to sit and read, how these people were considered, back in the 1820s.
Yep.
In the entire, there is no Chloe, because these people kept meticulous records, because this was property. This was money to them. It had to be documented 100%, and it had to be truthful.
Yep.
In that part of Louisiana, because it was Louisiana by then, there was never a slave named Chloe owned by any of the families in that area.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, the judge's wife, or the judge, he had a son and a daughter, not 2 daughters.
I think didn't he have 2 daughters and a son? I think he had 2 daughters and a son, because didn't one of his daughters...
Octavia, sorry.
Yeah.
Daughters and a son, but she wasn't pregnant.
No.
There wasn't a unborn child that died. And back then, when someone died with children, the mother, Sarah Matilda, actually died of yellow fever. Mm-hmm. And there are court documents that prove when she died of the yellow fever, mm-hmm. because dispositions had to be made for the children when somebody died back then, and they were left motherless. Mm. 2 of her children, one of the boy and one of the daughters, also died of yellow fever the next year. Mm. Okay. One died in the summer and one died in the fall. So all 3 of them did die, but they died of yellow fever, and they all died not at the same time.
Yeah. They weren't poisoned, in other words.
No. I mean, it was, that area had yellow fever outbreaks all the time. And when you've got a yellow fever outbreak, people die by the hundreds. Mm. And, there are court documents in the court there that prove, for Octavia, because it had to do with her part of the inheritance and stuff that was going to be left to her from, it's called a succession paper. Mm-hmm. It's got the dates, the actual dates, and the cause of death for Octavia's mother and brother and sister. Mm. And then when that happened, Judge Woodruff picked Octavia up and moved to another part of Louisiana.
Yeah.
And sold the plantation.
Yeah. Which you can't really blame him. I can't blame him.
No. I mean, when there were things going on there, and yellow fever's bad. I mean, I don't know how much you know about it, but it's, yellow fever outbreaks are bad, and, people die at the drop of a hat, and it is so contagious.
Yeah.
And, so he picked his living child up and sold his plantation, and, started, took his lawyering, out to, towards New Orleans to do that. And then he sold it to the Sterling family. And then, now here comes the legend of Cleo, the slave.
Well, one thing I was going to say is one of the things I've read about Chloe is, aren't people meant to say they've seen a woman with a green headscarf? And that's meant to be Chloe.
That's supposed to be Chloe.
Something that, you and I were both chatting about when we were talking off air, we were talking about some of the other places. We were talking about Jamie Rubio, who's done a lot of research into Bathsheba. We were talking about that. One of the things I said to her that when I was chatting to her that really drives me nuts is when people see something, and I'm not, same as you, I'm not saying they don't see it. I am not saying things don't happen there, but they assume it's this Chloe who's had this whole sort of backstory made up about her, and that she was, one of the things, wasn't it, that he cut her ear off, and that's why she wore the green headscarf.
Yes.
Well, the fact that Chloe didn't exist, it makes it very hard that Chloe had her ear cut off, and that's why she wears the green headscarf. But how many female slaves would have worn some kind of headscarf when they were working out in the fields to protect their heads?
Especially in the South.
Exactly. So why does it have to be this famous slave? It could be a slave that nobody knows her name yet, that work there. And this is one of the things that really bugs me, is that people sometimes put the pieces together to make it fit. They don't allow things to fit. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Because if you fast forward a little bit to the research that I did find from the 1930s, the first time I could actually find a published account of hauntings at the Myrtles, people do mention, but they don't mention she's a slave. They don't even mention that she was a black woman. They just say it's a woman with actually they say a green beret. Yeah. In the 1930s accounts, it's not even a turban.
Yeah.
And they refer to her as a French ghost.
Yeah.
Which that's why the cute little picture that my niece drew in the book of the little French ghost in the green beret.
Yeah. Les bouts.
Yeah. How do you know it's a French ghost? What do French ghosts say? Le bout.
Oh, I'd be alright. I can speak a bit of French. I'll come with you.
That's about all you're going to get out of me.
Les bouts. Bonjour. Yeah.
And if you look in, I actually found a historical account written about Judge Woodruff, where it talks about the fact that when his wife and 2 children died, he needed a governess for Octavia.
Yeah.
And he hired a governess from, Yankee Land up north, to come down to take care of her, and she was French.
Yeah. Yeah. Very plausible. There's so many other things it could be, but as you say, Cleo was the next one. And this is where the whole voodoo thing comes in, isn't it? Why do all these plantations seem to have a voodoo mistress associated with them? Rose Hall's another one that has voodoo associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to consider anytime you're talking about anything in Louisiana, because Louisiana is like the voodoo capital of the United States. And voodoo is supposed to be so evil, and, you don't want to cross anybody that does voodoo, and, anybody who knows anything about New Orleans or has ever heard of New Orleans, New Orleans and voodoo go hand in hand,
Yeah.
because you've got Marie Laveau and all that stuff from New Orleans. So to add an extra element to the evilness of somebody, you always accuse them of being a voodoo practitioner. And in the case of Cleo, and that one gets kind of convoluted because she's attributed to supposedly not being able to heal a child that didn't even belong to the person that supposedly owned her.
Like two generations out, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah, I mean, the child that she, that they supposedly brought in to save, and she couldn't save them, didn't even belong to this person. It's on down the line. So, Cleo did not exist either. But yet, you've got this, so now she's running around because she was wronged because, she couldn't save this child, and
she was another one meant to have been lynched, wasn't she?
I don't know if I...
Well, that's what I read in one of the stories about her, that she was another one who was hung for not being able to help the child.
It's always hanged, not hung.
Always hung. Then we go on to another one.
My favorite.
Which is your favourite?
The shooting story.
The shooting... Oh, no, I was going to go the Union soldiers next.
Oh, okay. I skipped ahead. Sorry.
That's all right. I was gonna leave William till the last one, because that's one of the ones that I questioned even when I watched it on television before I knew anything about the plantation. But anyone who's listened to any of my previous shows, when I've talked about the Civil War in America a few times, it's not an area of expertise for mine, but it is very interesting. And you've got the Unionists, haven't you? You've got the Confederates. Louisiana would have been Confederate territory, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless it was an area that the Unionists had taken over.
Yeah.
But, they were a Confederate state.
Yeah. So, supposedly, one of the things that appears in the house is where 3 Union soldiers were killed, and their blood can't be removed from the floors. It keeps appearing.
It sounds like a scene out of Gone with the Wind when Melanie comes down the stairs and shoots the carpetbagger that's coming to try to steal from them. Yeah.
It does, doesn't it? It does, but there's no proof. There's no evidence anywhere that this happened, is there?
No. Now, I will say, in this particular story, all I do is put out there that there is no proof that it happened.
Yeah.
That's not to say that maybe this one didn't, because there was a lot of looting done by opposing forces, depending on where you were in the war, and soldiers on both sides, went into homes looking for food, did unkind things to women, did get shot and killed. But there was normally a newspaper account of it at some point. There may not have been one when it actually happened, because they wouldn't have wanted to draw attention to it.
Yeah.
Or get arrested for murdering, the opposing force or whatever. But at some point, a factual account of it would have come down through a family history, and there is none. Does that make sense?
It does do. And you've got to bear in mind, if this was happening between sort of 1861 and 1865, most people... there would have been someone literate enough to have recorded it somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not that we're talking about something happening in the 1600s. We're talking about something happening in the late 1800s, where people did have a certain level of literacy. And a lot of the children of the families who owned the plantations, not so much the slaves, although a lot of slaves were, did get taught to read and everything, but a lot of the children, they would have, like you say, the governesses, they would be expected to be able to read and write to a certain level, wouldn't they? So you'd think even if a young child saw that.
Well, they were moneyed people, and especially the boys, because the fathers were grooming their sons to take over the plantation, and they had to be able to do read, write, and do arithmetic and things like that. But my point in pointing that out is that kind of thing did happen. It happened all over, during the war.
Yes.
That instance, but it's such a generic form of the story, since there are no details to it, and nothing that can be substantiated. And I'm not a big believer in somebody bled on the floor and every time you clean it up it comes back anyway. I mean, to me that's always been bunk. But that's one of those I'm kind of on the fence about. I just put it in there that's part of one of the stories that they tell, and I can't find anything to substantiate it.
Well, let's come to your favourite one last. Your favourite one. William Drew Winter.
Oh, and his poor wife.
And his poor wife, yes.
The given story is that poor Mr. Winter was, giving lessons to his son in the house, and he got called out on the porch and was shot by an unknown assailant in the chest with a shotgun. And the poor man managed to crawl himself from the gallery porch into the house up to the 17th step, which, if you've ever seen the picture of that staircase, that's a hard staircase to get up because it goes almost straight up.
Especially if you've just been shot in the chest at point-blank range with a shotgun.
Yeah. And dies in his wife's arms while shot, sobbing and wailing and trying to, keep him from dying. That's the story that's given out now.
Okay, well, before we go on to what actually happened, then one of the things I haven't said yet is what you do for a day job, Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and there's a reason I'm stopping you now to ask this question. Because for a day job, you work as a death investigator for the local medical examiners, don't you?
Yes, I do.
So you go to, I'll say, non-expected deaths. It's probably the easiest way to, without us giving the whole list of the incidents you go to.
We call them unexpected, sudden and unexpected.
Okay, so now, and I know, and one of the reasons you got this job was your expertise as a historical investigator. They saw how good you were at putting the pieces together, and you kind of got offered this job, which is pretty awesome, if you ask me. But the reason I am asking this right now is I'm sure in your experience you've seen someone shot pretty damn close up with a shotgun.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
More than I'd like, but yes.
More than you'd like, yeah.
Because we need to emphasize shotgun.
Yeah.
Not full firearm. And, and back then, the firearms would have been, they had bullets, but you had black powder too. But, a handgun is completely different from a shotgun.
Yeah. Shotgun, big ass thing, big bang.
Yes.
For a non-gun person. Yeah.
Big holes in your chest.
Yeah. So, assuming that person, who's meant to have been on horseback, levels a shotgun at him, is what, 10, 15 metres away from him when he shoots him? If that? If not closer? What kind of damage would that do to a human?
It would kill you instantly.
Would it kind of... The picture I'm getting is that Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep film where she's been shot through the stomach and she's got the big hole in her stomach and she's walking around as a ghost with the big hole in her stomach. Would that be that far off? It would shoot a very big hole in your chest?
Not quite that big, but yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have gone all the way through, but I understand the visual you're trying to paint.
Yeah.
So,
there wouldn't have been much left of his chest, put it that way. No. So... would he have been able to crawl into a house, across a big hallway, because we're not talking about a little tiny house here, off his porch, into his hallway, up some stairs with half of his chest missing?
No. And you have to consider that the account of the story was that the door that he went out of was not even the front door. So he was farther down on the porch when he was shot.
Right.
He would have had to crawl farther down the porch to get to the front door, to crawl in that door, to go up those stairs. Absolutely not going to happen.
Yeah, that's why I was asking you, as a medical as a death examiner who's seen this kind of scene, who knows what kind of damage a big gun can do to a person. It's impossible. But what's even more impossible is when you read the newspaper articles who state quite simply what happened to him, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they even say that some of the buckshot from the gun, it not only went into his chest but went into his neck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was riddled.
I mean, the newspaper article is very specific on where the buckshot hit him.
Yeah,
that he dropped immediately
on the front porch.
All it takes is All it takes is somebody looking up the actual account of what happened, because it was heavily reported. But you've got all these people that are going to this house and climbing up to that 17th step, trying to be where he died. Get your butt out on the front porch.
That's where he was. I mean, he might be walking up the steps as a spirit. He might be going up there to sort of he's reliving. We don't know. But the fact of the matter is, he didn't die on that 17th step. He didn't die in the arms of his beloved wife. He was shot by an still unknown assailant. Nobody knows why he was shot, do they? It's still a mystery. I think one of the names that's talked about is an E.S. Weber or something. Was one of the names that was bandied about. But this poor man was shot on his front porch with a very big gun and died there and then. Which is still a pretty horrific story.
Well, and would still give him every reason to haunt the place.
Oh, hell yeah.
But, don't... And again, I think it's, they want to romanticize what happened.
Yes.
And I don't understand why. I prefer more of the nitty gritty villain story than I do the romantic story.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's this whole Gone with the Wind antebellum thing. That's what it's trying to be, I think. Like you say, making it all sort of nice and film-like and, happy ending, almost that he died in the arms of his wife. Not alone and on his front porch and very suddenly. So what was the eureka moment with the Myrtles that you had?
Oh, we kind of already... It was the when I found out about the governess.
With the French beret.
Yeah, because a lot of the stories that have come out about the Myrtles say there was no mention of, any of these stories before a certain time period. Yeah. And, one of the things that I proved by finding, several different publications from the 1930s and 1940s, that what they are talking about is the woman in the green beret who would go in bedrooms and look at people that were laying in a bed. Mm-hmm. And every one of those stories refer to her, as the French woman in the green beret. And the moment for me was, I was like, okay, they've transferred this person into Chloe. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, okay, I get this now.
Yeah.
But the reports of this woman, this ghost woman, from the 30s and the 40s, even into the 60s, because somebody who bought the house in the 60s actually wrote a song about this woman.
Yes, yeah.
None of them refer to her as a slave.
No.
None of them.
Like you say, it's a sales thing, isn't it? It's to get more people through the door, and whether somebody genuinely believes it because they've been brought up, this is the story, and they think it's fact. And we know it's a thing of the human brain that it can turn things that are actually a fiction, but you've been told it so many times, you start to forget it's almost fiction, and you start to believe it's fact. But it doesn't mean that people like yourself and Jamie and myself and all that shouldn't be going out there saying, well, actually, if you look into this a bit closer, it's not what happened. It's not at all what happened. But if anyone wants to read Shannon's books, we're going to put the links up on the Parasearch page, but they're called I can't ever speak now, Paranormal, Folklore, Nevermore, and How Not to Be a Ghost Hunter. She's also got a website called the Paranormal Genealogist, and they can contact you through that, can't they, Shannon, if they've got any questions on any of the research you've done.
And I'm very open. If they want to find me on Facebook, just look up Shannon Bradley Byers and shoot me a message. I'll talk to anybody about history all day long.
You're a friendly little soul. I can attest to that, Shannon, because you spoke to me straight away. So, rather than, who are you, weird person from England? Why are you contacting me?
Well, with a recommendation from Richard like he gave me, who could not? Yeah,
he's great. He's like my pimp.
You don't tell Richard no.
He's like my pimp at times, putting me in touch with people. It's like, go and speak to them, or go and speak to them. It's like, oh, blimey, thanks, Rich. So yeah,
you
Shannon.
Don't tell that man no.
Pardon?
Nobody who's smart tells that man no.
No, they don't. No, I don't think I've ever actually said no to him. But then again, he's never said no to me either. And when I've asked him why he never says no to me, he says, because you always ask nicely. Okay, so all I have to say is please and thank you. I get what I want. So there you go. That's the trick. That is the trick with Richard. Say please and thank you. So if anyone wants to read any of Shannon's books, like I said, we're going to put the link up. You can contact her on Facebook, as she said, and on her website. do get hold of the books, especially Folklore Nevermore. It's got some fascinating cases in, and and Shannon writes it in a very easy to read, as she speaks style, which I'm surprised she's not chuckling at. I've said that because we were having a conversation about how some people think that you shouldn't write like that.
It's a silent chuckle.
Yes, because I've been told the same thing, but now I've been told, no, do it even more. It's your thing. You can't win. So, we'll say thank you ever so much to Shannon for joining us tonight on Haunted Histories. Do drop her a line if you've got any questions for her whatsoever. My name has been Penny G. Morgan, and I'll be back with you next week. And I'm going to Canada next week to have a chat with Wes. Well, I'm not actually going to Canada. I'm metaphorically going to Canada. I wish I was going to Canada to talk with Wes Coleman of Cops Paranormal. But until then, my friends, have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.